Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellbite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. I apologize for a bit of the sparse content over the last couple of days. I have been sick, unfortunately, and as a result of this, my review of the Aurelion Sol CGU will also be a bit delayed. But today I wanted to talk about 5 supports that I don't think justify playing in a competitive environment. Now, obviously, this means that if you enjoy playing the character and want to play them in normals, great, go for it. And in general, I'm going to couch a lot of what I say with generalities as well. I think these supports can be good if you snowball, but I think that that is a problematic assumption to make about a lot of these games. And let me sort of break this down before I get to the list themselves. Generally speaking, these supports have a relative lack of utility, right? Abilities or effects that are generally and universally good regardless of level or gold. These are things like Alistair knockbacks or Thresh hooks or heals and shields that may be delivered by a Soraka or a Janna. Effects like those that don't really scale with anything. They're just sort of always good and always available, whether the champion's level 1, 0 gold, or level 18, 10,000 gold. It sort of doesn't matter, right? And that's not to say that no support can use gold. I absolutely think that supports in general scale with gold the same way that other champions in League of Legends do, but I do think that in general, utility abilities and a lot of the common traditional supports that we see in League of Legends, again, the Alistairs, the Jannas, the Threshes, don't require gold in the way that other League of Legends champions need in order to scale themselves to the late game, because a lot of their value is guaranteed in the utility that's present in their kit. Of course, they can use items to scale their damage and survivability, but it's not as important because they have so many other things that they offer their team regardless. Conversely, these 5 supports that I'm about to talk about all share one thing in common, which is that their utility is extremely limited, and that they have one or more abilities whose only purpose is to do damage. And as a result, they require gold in a way that other supports do not need, which means even if you want to oversimplify the scenario and say that one of 3 things happen in lane, you can understand maybe why this champion's not very good. In scenario 1, you fall behind early, you aren't able to get any gold on the support, you do nothing because you have no utility and you don't do any damage. In scenario 2, you stay even. Off the bat, you're probably in an okay spot, especially with newer support itemization giving you 1,000 gold essentially for free, but as you are not a farming role, as you are not actually taking CS, you are going to steadily fall further and further behind the curve as the other farming champions in the game rapidly outpace you in terms of their gold generation, and as a result, even though you may eventually acquire some items, you will still not be dealing damage on par with the other champions in the game, and not offering much outside of the very few utility abilities that you still maintain in your kit. And option 3, which is that you snowball the lane and you're able to use the sort of glut of kill gold and assist gold in order to subsidize your purchase of big ticket durability or ability power or attack damage itemization, allowing you to therefore build as a mage or assassin or tank on a budget. The option 3 is the only option in which these picks look any good, meaning that you must snowball because any other scenario puts these picks behind, which also then means that their game plan is extremely telegraphed, which then means that the correct play by the enemy lane is extremely simple. Either kill the support who's opting into this extremely high risk, high reward playstyle, therefore denying them the high reward and opting fully into the high risk, or play extremely safe, preventing them from ever getting multiple kills and assists, and therefore preventing them from getting any of that extra gold and allowing them to slowly fall further and further behind as the game goes on. Even in this extremely simplistic scenario, you can still understand why these picks do not offer very much to their teams and why I feel like they're better off left on the bench or played in other lanes. Without further ado, let me go ahead and break down the list. The number 5 choice on this list is Swain's support. Now, this is the weakest choice, I will completely admit. I think Swain's utility, though fairly limited, is quite good. Nevermove's ability to root in an AoE is very effective against teammates that happen to clump up. It's also a very long duration CC when combined with the fact that he can pull it into a pullback at the same time, meaning that Swain has extended duration on that CC that's guaranteed to land, in addition to being a pullback, potentially putting you back in the fires of danger as opposed to merely locking you in place. And Vision of Empire is a very powerful tool for not only scouting, which is a very potent form of utility that very few champions actually have access to, but can be used in combat scenarios to block off enemy champions from fleeing through choke points, or to otherwise put them in a no-win scenario where if they move away from the AoE, they take a further route and they may still die anyways, or if they walk through it, they take the extra damage and slow. Either way, they're sort of hosed. Like, those 2 abilities are very powerful, admittedly, in Swain's kit, and I think as a result, the argument I have is a little bit weaker for this pick specifically. But the rest of Swain's kit is questionable from a support perspective. Death's Hand does nothing but damage, which, as determined above, isn't a realistic consideration in the support role, and Demonic Ascension is similarly damage-focused, with the additional weakness of having its sustain being based off of damage dealt, which means that if you're not dealing damage, you're not healing damage, and if you're not healing damage, you're not going to survive long enough to actually get value off of the drain effect on Demonic Ascension, and as a result of this, I feel like Swain generally doesn't do anything in the support position that other champions couldn't do better. Again, I think he has some potential viability in the support role, but he's still the kind of champion who, if half of his buttons are about dealing damage and dealing damage exclusively, he has to be able to build AP on a support's income, which isn't a realistic consideration in the vast majority of games. As a result, I think he is much better played in the mid lane or top lane position, or potentially as a bot lane carry, where at least he's farming, but generally speaking, I find his support to be extremely lackluster and not very potent in the slightest. The number 4 champion on this list is Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz, like Swain, only has 2 utility abilities in his kit. In this case, both of them are worse than Swain's. His Q can slow, but his Q is a fairly slow-moving telegraph skill shot, and he has a knockback on his E, which is also a fairly slow telegraph skill shot, which is very difficult then to actually land these in a vacuum, right? Trying to hit a target who can see Vel'Koz, who knows that they're coming, it's relatively difficult to actually land that, and even if you do have the drop on a target in specific, they can see the AoE of Tectonic Disruption as it comes out, and therefore respond to it if their reaction time is fast enough. Conversely, his W and R are exclusively damage-focused abilities, which just means that he's a Swain support without the utility abilities that Swain support has, right? Vel'Koz isn't scouting from afar, he doesn't have an extremely powerful hard CC ability, he has a relatively minor slow, and a singular hard CC ability, which still puts him ahead of some of the other picks on this list, that ultimately isn't that powerful. Now, this is one of the places in which players I already know are going to say, but Vel'Koz brings poke to the lane. To which I would say, poke is a consideration for a support, it is not a reason for a support. What I mean is that if you were already playing a champion like Karma or Soraka or Janna in the bot lane, you're playing them because they're doing things that you already wanted, right? Soraka is bringing heals and a silence, Janna is bringing powerful peel and a shield, Karma is bringing her potent shielding and lockdown potential as well. These champions are already doing other things for the lane, and then you can talk about their ability to also deal poke as an added benefit. Karma has very potent poke, and that is an attractive part of her, but isn't the reason you're picking Karma support in the first place. Similarly with Soraka and with Janna, you're not picking these champions for their poke, you're picking them for their utility-based functions. And as a result, I think that poke isn't a reason to pick a support. You should not be picking a support and saying, but they deal poke damage, like that's a reason to be playing them. I think that is the weakest component of any support's kit, and as a result, it doesn't hold that much weight. The other reason to potentially look at Vel'Koz is the fact that he deals true damage, which, as we all know, can't be itemized against. Except that we can. It's called maximum health. And Vel'Koz's true damage is flat, meaning that if he doesn't have ability power to back up the true damage, it sort of doesn't matter, right? 35 true damage might be potent if your target only has 100 health, but 35 true damage doesn't mean anything if your target has 5,000 health. And as a result of this, Vel'Koz doesn't do target agnostic damage the whole game long. He only has a couple of CC abilities, which aren't that potent in general, and as a result, I just don't think he's very good in the support position at all. Moving on to number 3, it's Xerath. Speaking of poke, that is almost exclusively why Xerath is played as a support, because his utility consists of a singular skill shot stun and a very minor slow on his W, which is even worse than Vel'Koz's utility, who at least has area of effect hard crowd control. The skill shot stun is also pretty bad. It's another telegraph skill shot that's body blockable, and worse yet, has a CC duration that scales with distance traveled, which means that if Xerath wants to make a play like Morgana, where you flash forward before queuing at point blank range to almost guarantee that it lands, if Xerath does this, he's literally cutting into his own CC duration. He can guarantee the stun, but he can't guarantee that the stun duration is going to be anything to write home about, unlike a champion like Morgana, who can do the exact same thing with full reward and none of the consequences. And as a result of this, the only reason you're playing Xerath bot lane is because you want to play stealth AP carry bot, which, I get it, supporting isn't the most fun for some players. Not for me, but for some players, they don't have fun playing anything that isn't a damage dealer, but look at what Xerath is actually doing in the support position. His playbook is hopefully poke you out of lane, and if he fails to do that and get value for his team in that way, he literally ceases to exist as a pick in his entirety in the support position. Second on the list is Brand, and Brand is more of the same as the previous two mages that I've discussed. He's even worse because he has one utility spell, which doesn't even have utility unless he lands another ability first, which means that you have even more time than other champions to react to the Seer coming out, and this is on top of Seer being another telegraphed skill shot that is body blockable, that can prevent you from getting any value from your hard CC whatsoever, which just makes him a lot weaker, I think, overall than Xerath in terms of his viability, but he at least has the argument of dealing % max health damage with Blaze, which at the very least, this I think is more relevant than the true damage off of Organic Deconstruction, because if your target has 1,000 health or 10,000 health, 2.5% of their max HP over a few seconds is the exact same. It does mean that if you are able to somehow build AP on a shoestring budget, that you're going to get more bang for your buck by having something like a Legendary's Anguish in that build as well. And that at least somewhat compensates for Brand's otherwise lack of damage in the support position, but I think that the rest of Brand's kit doesn't support the support playstyle because it's all damage-oriented. He's subject to the exact same scenario as Xerath and Vel'Koz, which is he loses lane and becomes irrelevant, or he falls off as the game goes on and he's just starved of gold because he's not actually farming. And as a result of this, I think that he's even worse than the other two picks because he doesn't even have ready access to hard crowd control, right? The Catarrh jumps in the team, you have to react immediately. Brand is pressing 2 buttons before the CC comes out. At minimum, Xerath can just spam the E and pray, which I just think makes him a significantly bad support pick that I really feel like just doesn't do very much overall. Finally, the number one pick that I just think people need to stop playing at support position is Twitch, who is currently a flavor of the month pick, but I think he's bottom of the barrel when it comes to utility because he has an area of effect slow and no hard crowd control in his kit, period. This means that Twitch literally does nothing, unlike Brand, who at least does % max health and has a hard crowd control ability, and Xerath, who has a hard crowd control ability, and it can at least sling damage from a safe distance, so even if it's not a lot of damage, he can still contribute whatever damage he has from a safe distance. Twitch can't do anything if he gets shut down. The only thing he can do from a distance without committing himself to a fight is his W, which is the slow. So in order to even remotely get some degree of poke down, you have to commit your one and only utility ability that's also your one and only potential bailout card by slowing champions that are trying to dive on top of you in exchange for extremely mediocre damage in general. He does true damage, but this true damage is, again, flat true damage, meaning that it's not actually that powerful unless you have items to back it up, which, again, if you're a support, you're really hoping you get ahead, because otherwise you will not have the item, or the gold to build the items that you need in order to actually have this true damage deal real damage. And like the whole rationale behind Twitch support is preying on potentially bad communication in solo queue environments, where Twitch can come out of stealth, can rapidly auto-attack a champion with Hail of Blades, and then immediately contaminate them for a bunch of free damage before backing away. I think that this is an interesting idea, but a coordinated bot lane will stuff that every single time because they will see the Twitch come out, they will both immediately focus him, and he will probably just die then and there because he just doesn't have any durability, he doesn't have any utility, he's basically hoping my damage is enough to deal with you, and it very infrequently will actually be. And as a result, I think this is why he's the weakest overall. He is the least he can actually contribute to a team if he's behind. I guess outside of stealthing and being a stealth ward that can move through the enemy jungle to maybe spot some people out, there's just not a lot that the pick actually does if you don't get ahead on him, and I just don't think that that's something that you can reliably opt into because, as before, I think that there are a lot of issues with trying to get these picks ahead in lane from the support position. They're much better played off in their solo lane or dual lane carry roles, respectively. But those are my thoughts on the 5 supports that I think people shouldn't be playing anymore. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the list, or if there are any other champions that you would recommend I add to the list. Leave those down in the comment section below if you have any thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.